So what if I told you that the classic advice we all grew up with, go to school, get good grades, find a safe, secure job? What if that's actually a trap? That's the huge, game-changing idea in Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and we're about to unpack the one single mindset shift that he says can unlock your financial freedom.
The whole story really revolves around these two major father figures in the author's life. On one hand, you've got his biological dad, who he calls his poor dad. Now, this was a brilliant man, a PhD, the head of education for the state of Hawaii, who somehow struggled with money his entire life. And on the other side, you've got his rich dad, his best friend's father. This guy never even finished the 8th grade, yet he went on to become a self-made millionaire, building an absolute empire.
So you have to ask yourself, how does that happen? How does a highly educated PhD end up poor, while a middle school dropout becomes one of the richest men in Hawaii? Well, it wasn't about being smarter or even working harder. It all came down to a specific kind of knowledge that, let's be honest, they just don't teach in our schools: financial literacy.
And this difference in financial know-how, it just created two completely different paths in life. One dad was all about job security, spend your life climbing that corporate ladder. The other dad, he believed in financial freedom, which meant spending his life building new ladders from scratch. You can see their totally opposing worldviews in just about everything they said. Poor dad would say things like, "The love of money is the root of all evil." Rich dad's take, "No, the lack of money is the root of all evil." Poor dad's advice was always, "Find a good company to work for." Rich dad's was, "Find a good company to buy." Just a total flip.
And this brings us right to the core lesson of the whole book. See, your financial situation has way less to do with how big your paycheck is and everything to do with your mental programming. It all starts with one surprisingly simple mental shift.
Kiyosaki's poor dad had this go-to phrase. Whenever he saw something he wanted but couldn't have, his default response was always, "I can't afford it." Now, Rich Dad believed this phrase was actually dangerous. He called it a sign of mental laziness. The moment you say it, your brain just shuts down. End of story. In total contrast, Rich Dad literally forbade those words. Instead, he taught Robert to always ask, "How can I afford it?" That little switch from a statement to a question changes everything. It doesn't accept defeat. It forces your mind to open up, to start looking for solutions, for opportunities, and for creative ways to get what you want. Do you see the difference there? It's so powerful. "I can't afford it" is a full stop. It ends all thinking. But "how can I afford it?" That's a question that kicks off a mental workout. It's like exercise for your financial brain.
So, what happens when you don't exercise that financial muscle? Well, you get stuck. You get trapped in what Kiyosaki famously calls the rat race, this relentless, lifelong cycle that keeps most people working their entire lives, and it's all powered by two very, very powerful emotions.
This whole lesson started for Robert when he was just 9 years old. Rich Dad hired him to work in one of his convenience stores for a tiny 10 cents an hour. After a few weeks of really hard work for basically nothing, Robert got angry and was ready to quit. And that's exactly what Rich Dad was waiting for. He knew the real lesson was just about to begin.
He explained that most people's lives are run by this exact loop. First, it starts with fear, the fear of not having money. That's what gets you out of bed and gets you to your job. Then, once you get that paycheck, desire kicks in. You start thinking of all the cool things you can buy. So you spend it, the bills start piling up, and then, boom, the fear returns, pushing you right back to work to start the whole cycle over again. It's a trap.
And here's the real insight, the part that most of us miss. A bigger paycheck doesn't actually break the cycle. No way. It just makes the hamster wheel spin faster. See, without a change in your mindset, more money just leads to more spending, and you're still completely trapped. Okay, so how do you get out? How do you escape? Well, Rich Dad's next lesson for Robert was to make him work for free. Now, why would he do that? He wanted to force Robert to stop thinking about a paycheck and start seeing opportunities that were hiding in plain sight. And this led to Robert's very first business.
So while working at that store for free, Robert and his friend Mike noticed something. The store owner would take the unsold comic books, rip the front covers off to send back to the distributor, and just toss the rest of the comic in a box. They saw an opportunity. They asked the owner if they could have the discarded comics, and he said sure, but with one rule: you can't resell them. And they kept their promise. They didn't resell them. Instead, they did something way smarter. They opened a comic book library in an empty room in Mike's house.
For just 10 cents, other kids in the neighborhood could come in and read as many comics as they wanted for hours. This little library was their first real asset. It was a system that put money in their pocket whether they were physically there or not.
And guess what? It worked like a charm. They were averaging $9.50 a week, which was a fortune for a couple of kids back then. But here's the most important part. They were earning that money while they were at school or out playing baseball. Their little system was working for them.
And that's really what it all boils down to. Robert Kiyosaki had two dads, and he had to choose which one he was going to listen to. He chose the mindset of rich dad. And that's the key takeaway for all of us. It really is a choice. We all get to decide which mindset we want to adopt. It doesn't matter what our income is.
So how do you actually break the cycle? Let's just recap. First, you've got to train your brain. Stop saying, I can't afford it, and start asking, how can I afford it? Second, start to recognize when those two emotions, fear and desire, are driving your financial decisions. Third, shift your focus from just earning a higher paycheck to building and buying assets. And finally, and this is maybe the biggest one, remember that your financial education is your single most powerful investment.
In the end, it all comes down to this one simple, powerful question. And I want you to take a second and ask this about your own life. Are you spending your days working for money, or are you building systems that allow your money to start working for you? Because the answer to that question will define your entire financial future.